Stacy was somehow involved with Barb's disappearance, if anybody's going to know anything about that, it would likely be Red.
Would it help any if I said the name Red Sullivan? Is that?
That's the name I heard, was Sullivan, yes. Right, yes.
That's the boy that left voluntarily?
That's right, yes.
Barbara Louise Cotton was a 15-year-old girl with big dreams in the small town of Williston, North Dakota. Friends and family described her as vibrant, intelligent, and caring, a typical teenager in many ways, but one with a distinct spark that set her apart. She enjoyed school, spent hours talking with friends about her future, and, like many teenagers, had plans and dreams beyond her small-town life. Williston was a safe, close-knit community, a place where doors were often left unlocked and neighbors looked out for each other. Violent crime was rare, and most residents never feared for their safety. But in April 1981, this quiet town would become the epicenter of a tragedy that would haunt it for decades. On April 11, 1981, Barbara left her home, telling her mother, Louise, that she was going out to meet friends at the local restaurant, Snack Shack. It was a Saturday night, and the town was alive with the buzz of young people enjoying their weekend. But Barbara would never return from her night out. Somewhere in the heart of her hometown, she would simply vanish. Barbara spent the evening with her friends at the Snack Shack, laughing and talking about school, upcoming events, and future plans. Witnesses last saw her walking in the direction of Recreation Park, a popular spot for teenagers to gather and socialize. Some say they noticed her alone as she left the restaurant, her figure fading into the darkness as she made her way toward the park. For years, witnesses and friends would recall seeing Barbara alone that night. But what happened between the time she left the Snack Shack and her expected arrival home remains a mystery. Somewhere in the gap of those moments, something went terribly wrong. At around 10:30 p.m., she disappeared without a trace, as if she had been swallowed by the night. The following morning, her mother realized that Barbara hadn't returned home. This was out of character, and as the hours ticked by, a gnawing sense of fear settled over her family. Barbara's mother reported her missing to the police, hoping against hope that her daughter was merely lost or had stayed with a friend. But as hours turned to days, it became clear that something much darker had occurred. With every passing hour, the urgency of the situation grew. Family, friends, and law enforcement rallied to search the town, covering every corner of Williston. Recreation Park was combed, abandoned buildings were searched, and posters with Barbara's face were placed on every available surface. Volunteers checked alleyways, fields, and riversides, hoping to find a clue that might lead them to Barbara. The people of Williston couldn't believe that a young girl could disappear so suddenly. The community had always been close, where everyone knew everyone, and strangers were rare. This was a place where people didn't lock their doors at night, where kids walked to school without fear. Yet, somehow, a young girl had vanished into thin air. The police began their investigation by interviewing Barbara's friends and anyone who might have seen her that night. They questioned people who frequented Recreation Park, hoping someone might have seen or heard something. Witnesses came forward, offering memories and fragments of that evening, but none could provide a concrete answer to what had happened to Barbara. In those first weeks, no real leads emerged, and frustration mounted as the town realized that the case was growing colder. As the investigation continued, a peculiar detail emerged. Barbara had recently been spending time with a man named Clay. Friends described him as older, mysterious, and charming, but with a somewhat unsettling presence. He would tell stories about his past, claiming to have been in the military and to have traveled extensively. Yet, few of his stories added up, and people began to suspect that much of what he said was fabricated. Witnesses reported seeing Barbara and Clay together several times in the days leading up to her disappearance. He seemed to have a strange fascination with Barbara, and though her friends had been uneasy about him, she had assured them that he was harmless. Some believed that Clay might have been the last person to see Barbara that night, and he quickly became a person of interest. Police brought Clay in for questioning. but his responses were evasive and his alibi was murky. While there were suspicions surrounding him, authorities lacked the hard evidence needed to press charges or detain him. After a brief interview, he was released. Shortly thereafter, Clay vanished from Williston, leaving no trace and taking with him unanswered questions about his relationship with Barbara. As weeks turned to months, the investigation faced numerous dead ends. In addition to Clay, police pursued several other leads that seemed promising, but ultimately led nowhere. One witness claimed to have seen an unfamiliar car parked near Recreation Park around the time of Barbara's disappearance. The driver was described as a middle-aged man, but his identity was never confirmed, and no one could say for certain if he had any connection to Barbara. Rumors began to circulate, filling the void left by the lack of answers. Some speculated that Barbara had run away, though her family insisted that this was untrue. Others suggested that she might have been abducted by a stranger or even murdered. The lack of physical evidence, no belongings, no signs of a struggle, only deepened the mystery. Authorities also received an anonymous tip suggesting that Barbara had been seen in another state, fueling theories that she might still be alive. Investigators chased the lead, tracking down the reported sightings and speaking to witnesses. But the tip proved to be unfounded. Every new clue brought renewed hope, only to end in disappointment. Barbara's family endured years of pain and uncertainty. Her mother, Louise, was a fierce advocate for keeping the investigation alive, but as time wore on, the case began to fade from public memory. Louise struggled with the absence of her daughter and the lack of answers. She would often recount stories of Barbara, sharing memories to keep her spirit alive and reminding the town that Barbara was more than just a mystery. She was a person who had been loved and who was deeply missed. As the years passed, the Cotton family found themselves navigating life without closure. Each family gathering, every holiday, and each milestone felt incomplete without Barbara. They carried a unique grief, knowing that they might never learn what had happened to their daughter, their sister, their friend. For Louise, this uncertainty became a lifelong mission. She pushed the authorities to revisit the case, to explore new leads, and to pursue justice. Although it became increasingly difficult to keep the investigation active, she never stopped fighting for her daughter. Her story was not only about loss, but about resilience in the face of unimaginable tragedy. Over the years, several theories emerged about what might have happened to Barbara. One theory was that she had been abducted by someone passing through town, perhaps a serial offender who preyed on vulnerable young women. This theory gained some traction as law enforcement looked into unsolved cases from neighboring states with similar patterns. Yet no definitive link was ever found. Another theory was that Clay, the mysterious man who had befriended Barbara, was somehow involved in her disappearance. Though he had vanished from Williston shortly after her disappearance, his name would remain tied to the case, raising questions about his true intentions and why he left so abruptly. In addition, some speculated about the possibility of an accidental death that had been covered up, or that Barbara had been targeted by someone in the town. Without evidence, however, these theories remained just that, theories. The lack of resolution continued to frustrate law enforcement, the community, and especially Barbara's family. Each theory felt like a potential answer, but without physical evidence, they were left only with suspicions and shadows of the truth. Decades later, Barbara's case was reviewed as part of a cold case initiative. Advances in technology had allowed for the re-evaluation of old evidence, and forensic tools that didn't exist in the 1980s became possible avenues for new insights. Investigators re-examined witness statements, DNA evidence, and other details, hoping that some small clue might have been overlooked. In the digital age, Barbara's case garnered new attention from true crime enthusiasts, bloggers, and amateur detectives. Social media platforms and online forums buzzed with discussions, theories, and debates about what had happened to her. For the Cotton family, this renewed interest provided a small glimmer of hope that someone, somewhere, might come forward with new information.